All right. After much technical difficulty, and will you please sit down? I have a cat in my lap. I had another cat in my lap right before we were trying to get our technical issues sorted.
Yeah, we figured it out. And luckily, I don't have a cat in my lap, so that's a plus for me right now.
Levi couldn't hear me, and then I couldn't hear him, but now it's all good. And then the cat I had in my lap was my youngest, Gabriel. Now Elliot is back, and apparently it's tub time, so he's giving himself a bath. So welcome everyone. We're not gonna talk about the Scottish play tonight. That's for sure.
No. But in the theme of plays,
acting. Genius.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Yes, we are going to be discussing that. So I say let's get this show started. The sky, it's dark, and the wind is blowing. Come inside. Sit down with a cup of tea while we tell you a little story. A story that lies beyond the oblong box. With your hosts, Levi Leland and Virginia Poe. Welcome back, everyone, to Beyond the Oblong Box. I am Virginia Poe.
And I'm Levi Leland.
Awesome. We're still the same people.
We're still the same. Last time I checked, yeah,
I am. Welcome to February, Levi.
February? We're on the 4th now. Okay.
Yeah. As of this recording, it is February 4th.
Right. Oh, that's true. Yeah.
We've entered the season of love.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. No, really, I love love. I do.
It's the idea of love more.
It's the idea. I'm just a person that really, if you're gonna, I'll probably end up saying this almost every single episode for this month, but if you're going to celebrate someone on one special day, and that's the only time you're really celebrating them, you don't deserve them.
Yeah.
Just saying.
Exactly.
I'm not bitter or anything.
Maybe we'll
sip my
tap
tea.
into that. Yeah, sip your tea. We'll tap into that on another episode. Pull up the calendar,
Oh, yes.
But we love Poe, and that's why we're doing this. And Poe loved a lot of women in his life.
Mm-hmm.
And there were a lot of women that were influenced to him to varying degrees. And so we thought that today would be a good day to touch on the first woman of his life, right? The woman that
his first love.
his first
love. The woman that he had, and I think his love for her was even more not exaggerated. It's not the word I'm looking for.
But I know where you're going. I think
the
theme of the idea of love being more than the love itself.
Right.
We're going to get into Elizabeth Poe, but
sure.
But not for like a spoiler. He didn't know her that well.
No. He was
a toddler.
Almost three. Close
enough to an age where you might start recollecting some things that are surrounding you. But essentially, Poe even later claimed later on in his life that he didn't really have much memory of his mother, but he respected her profession. He respected her talents. And so I think in that theme, like as I think you were trying to get at, was that he did love his mother, but just in the sense of his respect, his love for her profession and everything she stood for, and
Right.
for being his mother just in and of itself. Not so much that he loved her because of the relationship and the connection that he had with her, because he doesn't recall that really, you know.
Right. Exactly.
So, but we're gonna kind of get into that. We'll build up to that.
Yeah,
point, right?
we'll build into
We
that.
started at the end. Let's
get back to the beginning.
At the beginning, yeah.
So, talking about respect, and and especially for her profession. I guess we'll get into that. Just a brief moment with acting.
Yes.
Acting back then was not as initially was not as highly revered of a job as, let's say,
a lawyer.
Yeah, a doctor.
Or a doctor.
Yeah, no, I mean quite to the effect that prior to like the mid 1800s, I should say, acting was really looked at as like being a sin, and most actors would be ostracized to a degree,
like a
shunned. Yeah, it was like, oh, you're an actor. Oh,
right.
Oh, but entertain me, fool. They wanted that. They wanted to be entertained, but they didn't want to be seen with the entertainment.
Right. There was a lot of scandal around acting and
exactly
actors, actresses. There was some. Yeah, it wasn't.
There were lots of traveling companies. There were good things and bad things that came from both. The world of acting has always been a very open-minded one. So the kind of creativity and such that would have come from an actor, even back in the 1800s, was definitely not the standard way of thinking that most people would have.
Right.
But by the mid 1800s, so unfortunately after she died, it really was becoming more a profession. That, not to say that some actors were not respected for their abilities, for their talents, prior to the mid 1800s, but around the mid 1800s is really where we get a lot of respect and adoration for the actors of the day.
Right. I think it was taken a little bit more seriously as a profession and as a talent in that time than it was kind of towards the beginning stages of it, when it was looked upon with kind of a negative connotation.
You're more so in the mid 1800s, you're more socially accepted.
Right. That's a good way.
As an actor. Now, if you were an established leading actor, that's where people would begin to respect you as a person.
Right.
It's like, oh, they're not respectable. Oh, but they're a leading man. Oh, or a leading lady. Oh, okay, they're a respected member of society.
Yeah.
So it took a while. I mean, if the late Mrs. Poe were an actress now, I don't know if she would know what to do with herself. She'd be like,
right.
Because it is
a whole new world for her.
whole new world, whole new paycheck.
Yeah.
Whole new paycheck.
Yeah. Same thing with
even writers have done so here's
professions and talents
that are so much
drastically different in today's time than it was in that time, just paycheck wise.
Well, speaking of paychecks, so the average pay range for the various degrees of actors. So if you were a brand new actor in that time, you were looking at making $3 to $6 a week. If you were a utility player stand-in, then you made like $7 to $15 a week. If you were like a walking role, you made $15 to $30 a week, where your leads would make $35 to $100 a week, which I forgot to look up to see what that would be in today's standards. We'll get back to you on that.
Let's see. I could do no, I'm not even going to attempt to do the math, but it would be multiple thousands of dollars.
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
But then you had your traveling actors. And these were people that, would go all up and down the East Coast. Not to say that there wasn't, acting further south or further, a little further west, but your real big, heavy trafficked area for theater, seriously, Boston, New York, Philadelphia, DC,
they were like the major cities of America.
Yeah. And that's still a thing today.
Yeah.
Even down into like Richmond and going further south. So like all the big capital areas or, major metropolitan areas, you had a lot of theater, but there were companies that would travel. And there were specific actors and actresses that would also travel, or I should just say actors, because I know a lot of us fellow thespians who just use that term because it's whatever. But the traveling actors, they were making anywhere from $150 to $500 per engagement, which would be about 7 to 10 days.
It's a much larger sum.
A much larger sum. And a lot of times the men, yes, would definitely get paid more than the females. But their work was equally rigorous. It was equally intense.
Of course.
When you were acting then, you would be rehearsing 3 plays, 3 productions all at the same time, and much before you would have to get ready for your evening performance of whatever show you were doing. A season could be anywhere from like 30 or 40 plays up to 130 plays in a season, and those could change on a nightly basis.
Right.
Like, you might be doing, let's say we're going to be doing Hamlet one night, and the next night we're going to be doing, something else. It would just depend. And these actors were constantly prepping for these different roles. It was you had to have stamina. You had to have stamina. You had to have a good brain, a good memory recall, because you were constantly doing a show. You were constantly working.
Yeah.
Actors also had to either provide their own costuming or just flat out make their own costuming. So there was, and of course, then there were, set building and things like that needed to happen. But it's pretty intense, like how long their days were, and considering, and that hasn't actually really changed. I mean, when you're in the profession, they are very long days. I mean, I had some days where I had a 3 a.m. call. And I wasn't done until 6 p.m. And I'd be like, can I please go home now? My eyeballs are bleeding. But it's what you do. It's what you do. I had some calls some calls were at 9 p.m. and I wouldn't be in bed until, 10 a.m. the next day. So, right. I mean, if I were lucky. So it was, good health, stamina, the whole 9 yards. And that hasn't changed. that hasn't changed. Now, we don't necessarily have to make all of our own costumes. Some of us do know how to do those things. But you literally had to, like, all aspects of performance had to be done by the actors. So I can only imagine the amount of stuff that Elizabeth had to go through.
She had to go through, and she was
Yeah.
quite renowned here in America.
Oh, yes.
As an actress.
English actress.
English actress, born in London in 1784.
Last name Arnold.
Oh, I'm sorry, 87.
87. Yeah.
87.
Yeah.
She wasn't that old when she died.
No, she was not.
But her parents were actors. So the profession was in her family. Well,
and that's honestly how a lot of actors came about. You either came from a family of actors and you became an actor. That's really how it stayed for a very long time.
Right. I mean, we know she grew up in the field and, watching her parents act and being behind the stage and in front of the stage, wherever she was growing up, she was surrounded by this profession. So naturally she became an actress herself. And she came here to America with her mother in 1796. And it was shortly thereafter that she made her debut on stage here in America at 9 years old. So America loved her. I mean, the American audience loved her. She was a talented singer, talented actress. Obviously, we've said that, but it showed from a very, very young age that she could act, she could sing, she could do it all. She had a real presence on stage. So it's no wonder that she attracted men, of course, and suitors. So by 1802, she had married a guy named Charles Hopkins.
Yes.
And she became Elizabeth Arnold Hopkins. And but he had died
1805.
Yeah, like 3 years. Yeah, 3 years later, I think it was. He had died, so she was a widow. And so 6 months. That's the kitty. The kitty snoring.
That's Elliot. Elliot's my snore.
He's sound asleep.
Buddy.
Are we boring him that bad? I hope our audience isn't snoring right now.
Buddy, are you okay? Oh.
It's Elliot snoring, and then my heater that the audience is listening to in the background here, and it's
it's the ghosts in your basement. Don't say that.
But yeah, don't worry about it. Ignore the ghosts and ignore the snoring.
Ignore the snoring. It's not me.
Yeah,
it's my cat.
But let's see. So she married this guy. He died like 3 years later. She was a widow, and it was like 6 months after that she met David Poe.
David.
The man that would become Edgar Allan Poe's father. Oh, now it's my clock. Here we go. This is just like, we should just have like a sound effect episode where it's like the heater, the clock, the snoring. I mean,
well, by the time I'm getting a cuckoo clock for my dining room.
Oh, okay. So we'll have competing clocks pretty soon.
Hopefully by the time I actually get the cuckoo clock, I will have the office set up.
I'm in the same position. Even hear it. My little study upstairs is under construction, and we'll get there.
Eventually. It's okay. It just adds to the ambiance.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh.
So David Poe, of course, saw this beautiful woman on stage, a recently widowed woman, and so he decides that he was going to become an actor too and join her troupe and leave his lawyer schooling behind. He was in school to be a lawyer. His family, the Poes, were pushing him to be a lawyer. Like,
David Sr. was not happy about that.
No, definitely not happy. So he,
Grandpa.
So David Poe joins the acting troupe, and he's terrible. He's a terrible actor.
No, not at all.
But she married him, Elizabeth.
Yeah, she loved
David. They married. She's one of the best actresses on the American stage, and he's one of the worst. Stark contrast here with these two.
It's okay. It's okay.
It happens, right?
Yeah.
So they had 3 children together. So the first, William Poe, born in
William
1807.
William
Henry Leonard.
Leonard.
Right?
Yes.
Which, there was another cousin in the Poe family, Henry Poe.
Yes.
And
yeah,
so
Henry
they
Poe.
often get confused because William went by Henry. It was
Yes.
the two often get mixed up because their names were like exactly the
Exactly
same.
the same.
Referenced almost very similar.
Right.
So
there's a lot of that. There's a lot of that in the family.
And it doesn't help that the Poes married cousins too. So then cousins were first cousins and second cousins and in-laws.
Yeah.
And it was a little confusing. So we won't make it that confusing because we're just talking about Elizabeth today. So
no, that's next month's episode.
Yeah, we'll do the Poe family tree next month. When we have like more than half a brain, I think, between the two of us, and we could actually spit it out. Yeah. So 1807, William is born, and then the next child. What was his name again?
I
can't remember.
We call him Edgar.
Edgar? No, I think. Oh, Edgar. I think you're right. It was Edgar, I think. Okay, so Edgar is born in 1809. And finally, Rosalie, a girl born in 1810, late 1810, almost 1811.
Like they say December 1810, but they don't give a real date.
Right. It's kind of unrecorded, I guess, in a way, specifically. But so they're born pretty close together, only a couple of years apart each. Except, of course, Rosalie was quickly after Poe. But
yes.
But it was at this point that David Poe leaves the family before Rosalie is born. A
lot of it due to money troubles.
Yeah, there's conflicting, varying, all sorts of accounts around him. Some people say he died, but there's no evidence of him dying.
There's no record of him dying anywhere.
Yeah.
It's one of those unsolved mysteries.
Pretty much, yeah. Essentially, we don't even have a burial place for him. He just kind of gets wiped off the face of the earth. Essentially, he's just erased from history at this point.
He just disappeared into the shadows.
Yes, and we're left to wonder why. There's a lot of speculation surrounding this. Of course, seeing that he left so shortly before Rosalie's birth, there's some speculation that Rosalie was kind of a love child and not his, but this is of course speculation. Maria Clem later in life burned some letters that John Allen had written that had some damaging information about Eliza. And so scholars have kind of connected dots that, might not necessarily be true, but could be. We just don't know. But Rosalie was born. And so it was exactly a year later that Elizabeth Poe herself passes away from tuberculosis on December 8th.
1811.
She suffered a tough battle with tuberculosis, as we know how that disease can be.
She was still performing.
But
in the last year of her life, she was still performing. She not just tells you how dedicated to her art she was, but she did pull back quite a bit, but she kept trying. Yeah.
And she did have a lot of support, even though her husband left. I mean, she had a lot of friends and a lot of support from the, high society women in the day. And at the time, it was in Richmond, Virginia, that she was, performing and essentially dying. Frances Osgood, which would become Poe's foster mother, was one of those women that were, going to her bedside, bringing her food, what she needed.
Right.
And so it was shortly before her death that the paper in Richmond published this little blurb, and I'll read it for the audience now. And it goes like this, quote, "On this night, Mrs. Poe, lingering on the bed of disease and surrounded by her children, asks your assistance and asks it perhaps for the last time." End quote. So it's kind of poignant, I mean, she was a single mother, an abandoned mother with 3 children, with, very little hope for the future, so she was just trying to make the best of the situation for her children, I think. And so that's when, Frances Osgood, I think, had that idea that, hey, we should take in the boy. Rosalie was taken in by a well-to-do Richmond family, the Mackenzies.
Yeah, I thought William went with her.
William was sent to the Poes in Baltimore.
Oh, correct.
Yeah, and
sorry.
I often
my
wonder,
brain went.
Yeah. I might have said William. I meant Rosalie the first time. If I didn't say Rosalie, I meant Rosalie was taken in by the well-to-do Mackenzie family in Richmond.
Yeah.
And of course, we know Poe is taken in by the Allens of Richmond, Virginia, and William, being the firstborn son, was sent to live with the Poes in Baltimore. So I often wonder why Poe wasn't sent too, but I think seeing that William was the oldest and the son, that it would be
the first son,
to be taken in by relatives,
and he was in with. They sent him to his grandfather, right?
Essentially
he was,
involved. David.
He was with David and
the grandfather, and
Poe
always kept in touch with his brother,
and his sister,
throughout his whole life. And Rosalie, had some kind of developmental delay. She was described as, being a bit slow, and at that time, there was no terminology that was, as more appropriate than it is today. But she obviously had some kind of developmental or birth defect, in her mind. And so, but she loved Poe. She would talk about her brother all the time. I know towards the end of Poe's life, he recited the Raven with Rosalie, like sitting on his knee and acting as the Raven, quoting Nevermore as Poe's going through the poem. It was sweet, but she had a lot of admiration for her famous brother. I think she was selling photographs of him too later in her life. She died a pauper, sadly, in DC. I think she's buried.
She did, yeah. She's in DC.
She's in DC. So it's sad. I mean, the Poes all kind of had their own little tragic paths in their lives. And of course, Poe's mother and siblings were no different. But as we kind of said, to kind of come full circle, Poe didn't have much memory of his mother. And I often, and he claimed this later on in his life, and I wish I could source the quote. Maybe we can do that. I'll do that, and we'll post it on the page where it exactly came from. But, he was quoted in a letter saying that he didn't really have much recollection of his mother. He was so young when she died, but he respected her. And I think he appreciated her efforts in taking care of him and his siblings, even as sick as she was, and even towards the end. But I feel like a lot of people today, Poe fans, just historians, scholars in general, like to romanticize this idea that, Poe's mother was like a goddess to him and this angelic figure that he just adored and always kept in his mind his whole life. But in reality, I don't really think she had that much of an impression on his mind, seeing that he was so little. He wouldn't have had much. He would have only heard things about her from maybe Frances Allen, and so, we just don't really have much to go by on Poe's Accord. So when people kind of romanticize this idea about Poe's mother, I try not to be too much of a buzzkill, but I like to kind of throw it in there that, yeah, I get it. Everyone wants to romanticize that idea of, oh, the first, your mother's your first
Mhm.
true love. And, she was an actress. So Poe just, adored her and watched her on stage and was so, enthralled by her. But in reality, he was 2 when she died. So how much, almost 3, but even so,
Mhm.
how much recollection did he have of actually knowing and seeing his mother? How much did he have to remember, of her presence in his life? Not much, probably,
Mm.
but
Right.
I digress. I won't be too much of a buzzkill there, but to be realistic,
Yeah.
um, but she
But
was
I
no
mean,
doubt an influence in his life. He
oh,
respected her.
big.
He respected this idea of knowing about her. And I
Mhm.
think he carried that with him through his whole life. He respected the fact that she was a storyteller through a different medium than he was. She
And
was
the
an actress, he was a
fact
writer,
and the fact that she had unconditional love for him.
Yes, yes. And she didn't give up on him as his father did, so
Mhm.
he can respect that. And so, I think that's a good kind of nod to Eliza Poe to kind of, come
Mhm.
full circle in this episode is that, yeah, she was definitely an important figure in Poe's life, no matter how much actual memory he had of her. She was
Mhm.
essential to
Oh
his
yeah.
his welfare, from a very early stage.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. So there we go.
that's Elizabeth Poe.
Kind of like a
Um,
nice little sweet entry into our season of love for
yeah,
Poe. For
yeah.
the love of
For the
Poe.
love,
Well, we hope you enjoyed our little episode this evening, today, whatever time you're listening.
whatever time you're listening, don't worry what time we're recording this, people. Just worry about what time you're listening.
That's right. And of course, join us next week. We will be, of course, discussing more love of
Mm.
For with Poe. It'll be a good one, I promise. May even read a poem.
Ooh, that's
We
always
haven't done that. We haven't done that in a while,
yeah.
so we should probably do that.
You should probably try to sneak one.
We'll sneak one in. And yes, and so important things before we go, real quick. Don't forget, Telltale Steampunk Festival in Baltimore, Maryland, technically Hunt Valley, April 1st and 2nd. We will be doing a live in front of a studio audience episode of our podcast, very special for them, which will, of course, be our episode that week, in the first week of April. We have some very special things coming up that I haven't been given the clear yet. Should probably ask if we can start talking about it, because it's going to be really awesome. It's later this month and then next month as well. So super excited. Hopefully we can let the cat out of the bag
Yeah, very cool things to
soon.
come. Very, very cool. So stay
And
tuned.
our Patreon,
Oh,
we
yeah.
are going to have that. That's going to be launched tomorrow. So I will be posting on Facebook. Of course, we'll have the link on our YouTube, on our podcast site as well, for the link to our Patreon.
Very
So
exciting.
we're very,
stuff.
very excited. Yay! Yeah. All right.
Things are coming together.
Until next
We're
time.
doing it. Until next time.
Sláinte.
Cheers.
Bye.
You've been listening to Beyond the Oblong Box with your hosts, Levi Leland and Virginia Poe. Produced by EGL Brothers Limited, with production assistance from Peter D. Come Rest in This Bosom, arranged and performed by the Ninth Heaven. You can find us online on Facebook at BTOB Podcast. You can also find us on Instagram at Beyond the Oblong Box. And you can also reach us by email at btob1847@gmail.com. Please support our podcast by visiting us on our YouTube channel or any of your preferred podcast platforms.